Thank you. Good afternoon. I formally declare open this meeting of the Colac Otway Shire Council on the 11th of September 2024. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. Amen. Present, we have 6 councillors in the room and we have Councillor Costin online. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of the land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. Please be advised that this meeting is recorded and live streamed, with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation section of the meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practicable. By participating in open meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of information they share at the meeting, including any personal or sensitive information. We now move on to question time. Colac Otway Shire encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions at council meetings. 15 minutes is allowed for question time at unscheduled council meetings. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention before 5 on the 9th of September. No requests were received. Please note, as this is an unscheduled meeting, only questions pertaining to the agenda, to items on the agenda, will be responded to in the meeting. All other questions will, of course, be received, but they will be provided a response in writing at the completion of the meeting. Relating to items on the agenda, I have received a question from Mr. Judd, and I'll read that out and it will be responded to. Is the Colac Otway Shire Council going to have a definite final decision on the best value review of aged and disability services? At the unscheduled meeting on Wednesday, 11th of September 2024, since this council engaged with in a joint investigation was able to hand down a final decision in December 23. You have already had some council staff and members of the community waiting long over 1 year for an answer. Plus, you have multiple times already delayed giving a promised decision, and then you told clients how the investigation would be conducted. Then changed your mind without giving any notice. It was to change after the changes were made with adverse impact on some clients. Could I have a response, please, from General Manager Corporate Services?
Through you, Mayor. This item is being considered in the confidential section of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Council staff, clients and the community will be notified of the outcome as soon as possible.
Thank you. Moving to questions from the gallery, and in accordance with the new governance rules, we have sought registration for questions from the gallery. And I will call forward committee members who have indicated a question relating to an item on the agenda. And I have Charlie Buchanan has registered and would like to ask a question in relation to the development plan. Charlie, would you like to step up to the lectern and ask your question?
Be very brief. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Very brief on the reason for talking about the development plan. I think there's going to be some discussion about it anyway, and from what I've found out since I come in here, that discussion is probably going to be covered fairly well. But while I have the rostrum, I would like to express my disappointment at what's happened between the staff of the Colac Otway Shire and their treatment of the Colac Herald. Now, we depend very, very much on the Colac
Charlie,
Herald.
I need to remind you that the question is in relation to an item on the agenda.
Understood, Mayor.
Thank you.
Just to finish off, the respect that the local people have for our local paper as a conduit for this particular organisation is very, very important to all the people in the Shire. And I would feel very, very, I'd feel like I let down the team if I didn't say something about it. The Colac Herald and this organisation have got to get things back together and back together very quickly. Thank you.
So you don't have a question about the development plan?
No, that'll be handled a bit later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to make a comment? I'd like to make a comment that we've had a constructive meeting today and we've developed a way forward, and there will be a statement released this afternoon. Thank you. So that concludes question time. We'll move on to the next item. We don't have any petition or joint letters. I need to ask declarations of interest. Declarations of interest?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to declare a general conflict of interest in relation to item 8.7, the development plan DPO 10 Colac West. It's a general conflict of interest. My uncle owns land within the area that's under consideration.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Any other declarations of interest? CEO?
Thanks, Chair. I have a material conflict of interest in item 5.2 of the closed meeting agenda as it relates to my employment.
Thank you, CEO. Mr Sheeran?
Through you, Mayor, I have a general conflict of interest for item 5.1 of the closed agenda, being the service review of aged care services.
Thank you, Mr Sheeran. Councillor Finnegan?
Thank you, Mayor. I also have a conflict of interest in relation to item 5.1 of the closed session, the best value review. And this is in relation to general conflict of interest. My sister works within Council's OPAS service.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. I'll now move on to the confirmation of minutes, and I propose we move to confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on the 28th of August 2024. Do I have a mover? Councillor Arnott. Seconder, Councillor Hart. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Potter, Councillor White, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Arnott. Thank you. Carried 7-0. We'll now call for a procedural motion. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move a procedural motion to retain the order of business with the following provision: the council move to the closed session as close to 6 p.m. as reasonably practical, starting no later than 6:30 p.m. And that's to do with the availability of
our independent chair.
Independent chair.
Yeah, I should have added that. That's to enable our independent chair, Mr Millard, to join us.
I wonder if, with your indulgence, Mayor, that could be added to the resolution so anyone reading it understands why we did this.
Thank you.
Something to do with the availability of the independent chair in the closed meeting.
Governance?
Through you, Mayor, if I could clarify, the window of availability is between 5:45 and 6:15, so we can make that change accordingly.
And
if
make
that's
that and add
acceptable.
that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we made that change. Councillor Arnott, can you confirm for me that that's the motion that you wish to move?
I think I moved it, but
Oh, sorry.
but perhaps Councillor Arnott might have seconded it.
I've got it the other way around, but Councillor Hart, you're moving the motion. Councillor Arnott, you're seconding the motion. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? I'll go Councillor Costin on screen, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Hanson, Councillor White, Councillor Potter, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Hart. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 8.1. Grey-headed flying fox. CEO, would you like to make a comment there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would like to explain to the gallery, the councils have already been advised that I have again withdrawn this item. And the reason for that is it was withdrawn last time to enable us to get some further advice from the Commonwealth department responsible for the EPBC, the Environment Protection Biodiversity Conservation legislation. We've received some advice which is helpful, but we actually now have an action to seek a pre-referral meeting with that department, and I think it's more appropriate we have that meeting before we ask council to consider this item. So we were hoping to have all information that we needed to close it out, but we're not there yet, so we're withdrawing it again, and it'll be presented after we've received that advice.
Thank you, CEO. So on that note, we'll withdraw that item and we'll move on to item 8.2, and that's the Tirrangower Drainage Scheme Review of Committee. The view of this report is to advise Council on the outcome of a review of the former Section 86 Tirrangower Drainage Scheme Committee that had been established under the former Local Government Act 1989, and seek endorsement of the creation of a new advisory committee to assist in the administration of the drainage scheme. Councillors, before I ask for a motion, do any councillors wish to ask a question of officers? No questions of officers?
Yes, Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Costin. Keep an eye on you up there on the screen. Councillor Costin.
Thank you. I'd like to ask about the cost recovery for this scheme. Do we recover the full cost of supervising the work? And if we don't, how much do we contribute, or do we contribute just to project management, or do we actually contribute to the infrastructure work?
Mr McNeil, would you like to answer that question? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Council doesn't recover the administration costs of this committee or the committee that existed in previous times under the old Local Government Act. And in the past, the works have been undertaken by the members of the committee when it was actually a Section 86 committee. Under this proposed change in governance structure, Council would be engaging or contractors directly. It's not considered that that would be a significant cost to Council. So the cost of the works and the contracted works would be paid for using the funds that are collected from the special rate, but not necessarily the administrative funds of Council in doing that.
Thanks, Mr
So,
McNeil. Further
follow on,
question,
if I
Councillor
may.
Costin.
Yeah. So the 22,500 we have in our budget for drainage maintenance of the scheme, is that only to cover administrative costs, project management costs, or do we actually fund infrastructure?
Through you, Mayor. If there was a more significant piece of infrastructure that needed to be undertaken, then project management costs could be recovered through that. But in the day-to-day engagement of a contractor to undertake weed spraying or some of the other minor works that occur there, that in itself wouldn't require very significant time for project management and would just be addressed through Council's ordinary costs for its infrastructure operations.
Thanks, Mr McNeil.
Sorry, I don't think the question's been answered. The money that we have allowed in our budget, is that to implement works funded by the beneficiaries, or do we actually use that money to implement works ourselves?
Through you, Mayor, the funds that are collected from private landowners through this scheme are used to spend on projects related to maintenance of the drainage scheme. Council itself doesn't spend its own funds on the maintenance of this scheme. It's the funds collected from landowners.
Thanks, Mr McNeil.
So the 22,500 is just for our administration. It can't be spent on
And
works.
Sorry if I've not been clear through you, Mayor. The money that's collected from landowners is spent by Council on works for the maintenance of the scheme. It's not spent on administration costs that are incurred by Council.
No, we're still not there yet.
CEO, did you
22
want
and a
to
half
comment?
that Council is putting in, we pay for administration costs, but do we also use that to pay for works? Do we fund works, or are all works funded by the beneficiaries?
Through you, Mayor, the money that's collected, the 22,500 through the special rate scheme, is only spent on works for the maintenance of the drainage scheme. It's not spent at all on administration costs incurred by council.
Thank you.
Sorry, I see where the problem is there. I thought the 22,500 was a budget allocation from us rather than what we received in revenue.
Thank you. I think we've got some clarity around that. Thank you now. Mr McNeil, any further questions? No further questions. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Arnott? Is it to be
Thank you,
seconded?
Mayor White. I would like to move
Councillor
a motion
Potter?
consistent with the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Arnott, could you repeat that, please?
Moving a motion consistent with the officer's recommendation,
Officer's
please.
recommendation, and that's to be seconded. Councillor Potter. Councillor Arnott?
Thank you, Mayor White. It's absolutely fantastic to see this come to this point now. I was contacted by some of the farmers within this scheme going back shortly after I joined council to try to help them to work through this. And it comes back to not as a fault of them or for council. This was a change in government legislation going back to September 2020 where they changed the rules and it affected many of the committees that run the council, halls, sports facilities, yada yada. This one was one that was bit unclear what to do with going forward because it sits on private land predominantly. And this is, so it's pretty much a private scheme, but it also encompasses some council land, such road reserves and whatever. So we had a shared responsibility to make sure this went forward in an appropriate way. Under the current program, the way it was run, there was particular significant risks to the members of the committee if they were there doing works themselves, and which they often were because they were committed to see the right outcome for themselves and for everybody else. And there was a risk to the ratepayers, which we needed to address. So we need to find a way through this. And for the moment, this is what we're going to do with this advisory committee. And it's been structured in a way with a terms of reference which binds council and the members together in a partnership so that we get an appropriate outcome as we move forward. It allows them to continue to feed back into council, and council is committed to work with them as they have to date to deliver on this process where we've paid for expenses to date from the 22,500 the farmers themselves pay. So we're not asking ratepayers to cover this, the farmers themselves pay it, we simply work to facilitate it. The committee actually have built up a long-term relationship with contractors, which is no reason why that will not continue further forward with council. Just got the oversight of the council procedures behind it. That protects, as I said before, the committee members, whom we're going to call for new people to be involved with to carry this forward, and to the ratepayers. So it gives a twofold capacity for protection there and a clarity of how it's going to operate. It's important to understand we need to thank the committee members that have been involved with this in the past. They've put so much of their own time to make this continue to work. And it's also important to acknowledge every farmer who is a part of this scheme. If one farmer decides to not be a part of this, they could make life difficult for everyone, but they've chosen not to do that. Everyone works cooperatively together to make the scheme work, because if they didn't, a blockage in one part of the drainage scheme would affect everyone upstream of that, and that would be disappointing. So this is a cooperative arrangement. Everyone has to work together, and the property owners have to work with council, council have to work with them. We've been able to achieve that to date, and I'd love to see that continue to go forward. And I'd like to thank the executive who have taken this on board and seen a way through, found a way to make this work, and have been very proactive, meeting with the landowners themselves, meeting with the scheme members to find a way and working to put a terms to reference together that everyone's comfortable with. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Councillor Potter?
Thanks, Mayor. Councillor Arnott's summed up everything. I don't need to add to it.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No other councillors wish to speak. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hart, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Potter, Councillor White, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Costin, carried 7-0. Thanks, councillors. We'll now move on to item 8.3, Lake Colac Advisory Committee, appointment of the community representatives. The purpose of this report is to consider the appointment of community representatives to the Lake Colac Advisory Committee following an expression of interest process. Councillors, before I ask for a motion, do any councillors wish to ask a question of officers? There's no question of officers.
Mayor,
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
councillor. I'm looking for that. Councillor Costin?
thank you. I asked this question and I still haven't received an answer. We're looking to appoint community members to the committee as identified in the confidential attachment to this report. When I look at the confidential attachment, and I may be looking at the wrong document, but I only see a list of the applicants.
Can I, Mr. Sheeran?
Yes, through you, Mayor. So Councillor Costin, as part of the supporting information for the August council meeting, there was a list of nominations plus some background information. Unfortunately, that first page, the list, wasn't carried forward into this agenda for you. So if you go back to the August council meeting, in the supporting information, it's there.
It's the same supporting information.
It's the same supporting information.
Councillor Costin?
The members that we are identified in which document? The members we propose to appoint are identified where?
So the 9... Mr. Sheeran, go on.
Sorry, Councillor Costin, if I wasn't clear. So there's a list of nominations in the supporting information that was part of the August 2024 agenda in your docs on tap.
And reloaded
Hey.
in the 11th of September as well.
Okay, so the docs, so we've got 9 nominees. We're not appointing 9, are we?
Sorry, Councillor Costin, what was that last bit?
So
No, we're not
document-
appointing 9. As has been outlined in the process and in the terms of reference, it's 3. And we asked for the expression of interest, and we have now come through a voting process. We've got the 3 nominees.
And where are the 3 nominees?
It's in the
identified?
recommendation.
Which recommendation?
Councillor Finnegan?
The appoints community members, it actually doesn't mention who's been identified in the recommendation that's there. But aside from that, I'm just wondering if I might be able to clear out perhaps what Councillor Costin might be trying to ask. In the past, we've had when we've had reports brought to us in relation to appointment of community members to precinct structure plans and the like, and there's been a recommendation from officers in regards to who to appoint. Has there been a recommendation from officers for community members to appoint to the Lake Colac Advisory Committee for this item?
Mr. Sheeran?
Through you, Mayor, no, officers haven't provided a recommendation on which 3 members of the 3 nominations to appoint. That we feel that's up to councillors. There's a number of really strong nominees, and it's over to council to make a decision on who they appoint.
The governance would also like to make a comment too on that. Then Councillor Finnegan, I'll come back to you.
Through you, Mayor, sorry, in helping to navigate through this, in order to put a motion in front of council from which you can then have a discussion and debate and vote, a councillor would need to move a motion listing the applicants that the councillor would like to put forward for resolution. So that one has been prepared, but we would need a councillor to move that for us. Thank you.
I also have a follow-up question, Mayor.
Question, Councillor Finnegan.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, given that reports have been provided in the past in relation to the appointment of members to precinct structure plans and the like, and the officers have recommended which members of the community to appoint to those, I'm just wondering why that hasn't happened with applicants and people who are seeking to have applied to join the Lake Colac Advisory Committee.
Do you want to make a comment, CEO?
Thanks, through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Yes, for the Deans Creek Precinct Structure Plan, officers did make some recommendations, but we've had feedback at other times from councillors that they prefer to just make the decision themselves in the chamber, and we respect that. And so it has also been more often than not in the last few years our practice to not make recommendations of individuals.
Thank you, CEO.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So, Mayor,
Yeah. Yes,
I
Councillor
understand
Costin.
correctly, we need to modify the recommendation before us to nominate the 3 members. Is that correct?
Yes. And in relation to the process that we've undergone, whereby I asked councillors for their 3 top recommendations, and we went through that process, and now we've got a clear way forward with who the recommended community people are. We can't name those people because we've got to inform all candidates. So we have a recommendation before us, and you have who these people are. It's applicant 2, applicant 6 and applicant 7. Question, Councillor Finnegan.
I was going to say I'm prepared to
You'll move that motion.
move that motion.
You'll second it, Councillor Hart. Thank you. That's the motion. You want to confirm that you're moving?
Yes, I'll read the text of the motion, seeing as
Thank
it's
you.
different to what's in the agenda. So the motion before council that I'm moving is that Council 1 notes the expressions of interest received for the 3 community positions on the Lake Colac Advisory Committee and thanks those that nominated. 2, appoints community members, being applicant numbers A, applicant 2, B, applicant 6, and C, applicant 7, to the Lake Colac Advisory Committee as identified in the confidential attachment to this report. 3, writes to each person that submitted an expression of interest to inform them of this decision and thank them for their interest.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Hart, you're prepared to second that motion? Thank you. Any other... would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Finnegan?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is a matter of course. Obviously, the committee structures for a number of council committees have had to change due to the Local Government Act of 2020, as Councillor Arnott has mentioned in the previous item relating to the Tirrangower drainage scheme. It's given us an opportunity to look at terms of reference and the like and update things as well. And at this point, we have arrived at the applicants we've decided to put forth in this motion by the Mayor requested that we sort of provide via email to her a vote, on the list of applicants as they are named in the report by their nominee number, and a collation of that has been taken, and these are the 3 applicants who have won in that process. I should mention I probably would have preferred to do it in the chamber because I do have some, I just think it would be much better to do these sorts of things in the chamber and out in the open. Leads to, defends us from issues of perhaps doing things behind closed doors, but this was the position of the councillors, so this is the way we've done it. There were very strong applicants from the community. All the applicants were very strong applicants, and I thank everyone who decided to nominate for this committee, because everyone who has nominated clearly loves our lake and all that it brings for our community. So,
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Lake Colac's obviously a very important feature of Colac and surrounds, and I'd like to thank the 9 people. It's already been said that there were 9 applicants for this committee. I'd like to thank all of them for their interest and their preparedness to contribute to this advisory committee. There was an informal process to see if there's any degree of consensus for 3 members, and these are the ones that have come up. I will note that their names will be disclosed when everyone's been informed of the outcome. I'm not so sure that voting on each one at a time would have achieved anything, mainly because they'd just be identified as applicant numbers anyway, so it wouldn't add anything into who the people were. But the people who are on this committee will be disclosed once everyone's been informed of the decision. That is, all the 9 people who've applied.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter?
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to make the point that the decision of council to appoint members of this committee is made in the chamber, and I haven't seen anything untoward that that decision should be questioned or whatever. I think the process has been clear and good, and we're saving time and making a clear and honest decision in the chamber.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Arnott?
Thank you, Mayor White. Just echoing Councillor Potter's comments and Councillor Hart's and certain components of Councillor Finnegan's, but this has been, we've had 9 strong applicants. I felt that I was able to make my nominations the 3 I felt was appropriate for it without fear or favour, and put those forward along with everyone else, and that was added up to get to the ones we have here. Again, it's not a matter of names in here in the chamber, that would be inappropriate. So very happy with the process, and I believe it's been transparent and we've come to a reasonable conclusion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Any other councillor? No other councillor. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Potter, Councillor White, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Arnott. The motion's carried 7-0. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to item 8.4, update to the S6 Instrument of Delegation Council to members of council staff. And the purpose of this report is to present an updated S6 Instrument of Delegation from council to members of staff S6 instrument for each of the relevant acts and regulations because of the biannual update to legislation as advised by Maddox Legal Service. Councillors, before I ask for a motion, do I have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. On page 118, this report explains some of the reasons for changes to the delegations, but I would like to ask, can council please confirm that this updated instrument of delegation doesn't change key planning delegations and does not implement the recommendation in the planning scheme report at item 8.8? Just to be clear, that if there are 4 or more objections against a planning application, it will still be decided by the planning committee, which currently consists of councillors and not officers, that the number of objections has not been increased, and also to be clear that if the officers recommend refusal to build a house in a farm zone, that the matter will still be decided at a planning committee, which is currently councillors and not staff, even though the report at 8.8 suggests such decision should be by the staff.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Hart. I'm very happy to give you that reassurance again that there are no changes to the planning delegations through this instrument. This is our regular 6-monthly review to make sure that any changes of legislation or new legislation is picked up and that officers can be delegated to address those new requirements only. It's completely unrelated to the other planning scheme review report.
Thank you. Councillor Costin, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. At our last council meeting, we discussed the conduct of events on Lake Colac, and council requested that decisions in relation to primary contact events where officers propose or recommend refusal, that that decision be referred back to council. Is this captured in this document?
Through the chair, I'm happy to respond.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costa. No, this is a separate matter. These are powers, functions, authorities and duties under legislation that council holds that it's delegating to staff to fulfil on its behalf. The resolution of council that you're referring to is about implementation of a council policy, the public events policy, and so it's not a legislative authority. So we're very clear about that restriction on our delegation for the policy, but it's captured through a separate decision of council being that resolution.
Thank you, CEO. Do I have any other questions? No other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our... Oh, sorry, Councillor Hart.
Sorry,
Another question, or are you
just
enthusiastic?
happy to move the recommendation on page 118.
Thank you. So you're going to move the officer's recommendation. Do I have someone to second that? Councillor Arnott. Councillor Hart, do you wish to speak to the recommendation?
Briefly, this is an important process that we have obviously delegate council officers to do various tasks. There is a regular review of those delegations, and some of the things it says have changed on page 118 relate to residential tenancies and Road Management Act, amongst others, and the Food Act. I was pleased to get that assurance that we're not changing the planning delegations that I touched on before, so on that basis I'm happy to support this particular resolution.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Arnott.
I'll reserve, thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Arnott.
Just to reiterate Councillor Hart's comments, thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Potter, Councillor White, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Arnott. The motion's carried 7-0. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 8.5, Forest Wastewater Project. The purpose of this report is to award contract 2427 Forest Caravan Park Wastewater Treatment Upgrade Works. Councillors, before I ask for a motion, do I have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Can we just get some clarification how these works sit in terms of the caravan park and issues that Barwon Water were looking into in terms of possible waste disposal systems for the town of Forest?
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Mr Sheeran?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question. So Barwon Water are continuing to investigate a potential wastewater solution for the whole township. Unfortunately, we're at this point in time where we're unsure when that would occur. We're pretty confident it will, but they still need to obviously do the detailed design and then secure the investment for the upgrade. These works can't wait. Our caravan park registration is reliant on having a functioning system, so we do need to get on and do the works, and council's allocated the budget, and this tender falls well within the budget allocation.
Thanks, Mr Sheeran. Any other questions? No other questions. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Arnott, motion you'd like to move?
Move the officer's recommendations, please.
The officer's recommendation as on the screen. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. There's really not much to say about this. This is just necessary works, as been pointed out. The tenders have come in well and truly within our budget, so it's important to proceed, and the park just needs it to continue to operate. The proceeding of the town to be connected to wastewater management in the future, that will be fine, and I'm sure that this will continue. This will then play an appropriate part within that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm pleased to support this. This has been some time coming, and it's necessary to the smooth operation of the caravan park and avoid potential environmental risk and hazards. I'm very pleased that this has been subject to a rigorous procurement process and was held up for double checking and triple checking by the CEO. So everyone should have total confidence in the way this tender has been conducted, and I'm pleased to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Does any other councillor wish to speak? If no other councillor wishes to speak, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Hanson, Councillor White, Councillor Potter, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Hart. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to item 8.6. 8.6 is the Colac Regional Sale Yards Advisory Committee Terms of Reference Fee Amendment and Services Update Review. The purpose of this report is to seek endorsement of the revised Colac Regional Sale Yards Advisory Committee Terms of Reference, recommend a change to the fees and charges for hay bales, and provide an update on the Colac Regional Sale Yards Service Review. Councillors, before I ask for a motion, do any councillors wish to ask a question of officers? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. I just noticed within the motion, as recommended by the officers, a change in the price for bales of hay, which is fine. I get that's a market-driven thing. Just seems this is a clumsy way of doing it. We're looking for a better way that the Committee of Management can, I guess, handle this in a way that's more reactive to market in the future.
Mr Sheeran.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, I think what we'll do in future, and as we come to the next review of all fees and charges, we'll look at potentially a different way of setting a fee for this, rather than having to come back each time to cancel, each time that the market might change in terms of pricing for hay bales. So we'll take that on board and we'll look at potentially a better way to do that into the future.
Thanks, Mr Sheeran. Any other questions? Councillor Hart.
When you're ready, I'm happy to move the recommendation for this item, but I'm not sure if someone else...
Move the officer's recommendation. Any questions before we move the officer's recommendation? No further questions. Councillor Hart, you're moving the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I will talk to this a little bit. I'd like to thank the community members who've given their time to serve on the Sale Yards Committee in the past, and thank in advance those who might offer there to be members of the revised advisory committee. I think that Councillor Arnott's brought up a good point on the cost of the bales in point 4, and I hear that that's going to be addressed. I think that there's a bit of a missing link in the Colac Regional Sale Yards Review, and that's mentioned in number 5. I think there's opportunities for the sale yard business, particularly now that Camperdown's closed. And even with the best of intentions, I think those opportunities are constrained when the sale yards is in council's ownership. Council has many different responsibilities and demands on its funds, from roads to BMX tracks, from sale yards to footpaths, and hundreds of others. Council staff also have to focus on these many different responsibilities. And when I look at the sale yards review, that obviously there's more work to be done, I look at what happened when council sold its ownership in the Colac Abattoir. That mentioned the new owner of that business could give their full attention to the business and mean they had access to funding without having to compete with other worthy projects that a council has to consider. And I think that the council needs to seriously consider an expression of interest process to sell or lease the business, and possibly to sell or lease the freehold land as well. This will allow the new owner to capitalise on the opportunities to the benefit of the users and the local economy more broadly. I also think that if the sale yards is sold as a going concern, that there needs to be recognition of the farming community's contribution via their custom and their rates. And I think the future council could look to the model or precedent set when the kindergarten building in Apollo Bay was returned to the community, who in that case fully undertook the funding. And I think council could give serious consideration to sharing the proceeds from the sale of the sale yards business and freehold land between council for other council priorities, and a one-off rebate to all ratepayers who pay a farm rate. A proportionate rebate, so those who pay more would get a proportionately higher rebate from the sale proceeds. $1 million would fund approximately a 15% one-off rebate. I'm just putting forward that that's something that needs to be considered. I'm just trying to use those figures to illustrate the concept. But I think it's the missing link about the opportunity to either sell the sale yards or to lease it out. It's an important facility. It doesn't have to be in council ownership. We have supermarkets in here. We don't expect the council to own a supermarket. We have petrol stations. We don't expect councils to own petrol stations and so on. It's a really important business, and I think it could prosper even more if it was not necessarily in council's ownership, whilst acknowledging the best of intentions of council in managing it.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Finnegan, you seconded?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I thank Councillor Hart for his comments. He's always very, how do I put this, very all across the detail of motions and the like. And I do agree that, you know, the sale yard service review, there is more work to be done. We should be considering all options. I've been council's rep on the sale yards committee pretty much since I came onto council. I've really enjoyed the role since the committee started meeting again. And it's just really good to see the passionate people who get involved with the committee and being able to meet regularly to discuss what goes on at the sale yards. Certainly I'm probably not the sort of person anyone would expect to, you know, volunteer for such a role or enjoy such a role, but I've really enjoyed it and come to develop a good relationship with these people on this committee. This motion obviously is to update the terms of reference for the sale yards. This is again a holdover from the update to the 2020 Local Government Act and something that needed to be done. So I'm looking forward to it, and I thank everyone who has served on the sale yards committee and will seek to serve on the sale yards committee in the future. Doing fantastic work for the community and for the yards.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter and Councillor Arnott.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm happy to support this. I think the dialogue's gone in a slightly different direction than I thought, but so I'd just like to put on the record that I'm supportive of the sale yards and that livestock sales in this area have been held for generations, and come from generations of farmers and have attended many of those sales. And I do agree with Councillor Hart that there is potential perhaps to look for other options, provided that sale yard activity does continue. There's opportunity for growth out there, opportunity to improve the truck wash, and I note that it is more than paying its way at the moment, Mayor, so we've gone off track a little bit from the original motion, but I thought I'd like just to put that on the record.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. It's absolutely good to hear Councillor Hart move this motion, and I support it, and Councillor Finnegan seconding it. And I note his support for the committee with this, which is with thanks. And I note support for by the committee members also in thanking them, as Councillor Hart said. But to also understand that there's opportunity for these businesses to grow beyond what council can do as a nurturing these things. We've carried this, we've been able to bring this into this point where we're now, it makes a surplus, which is great. But can it do better? Can it do more? And maybe in a partnership in business like Australian Land Company, which is now one of the largest businesses in this area, employers, that's gone from strength to strength. We're looking for the Visitor Information Centre to be a partnership there with businesses to see if we can grow that from strength to strength. We've got the Lake Caravan Park. That's going from strength to strength by partnering with business. So maybe we can do that with the sale yards as well. So it's a suggestion just to have all options open to get a better outcome, not saying that we should do one thing or other. And I'll note that the Lake Caravan Park, just for people to understand, we now have about 700,000 of private investment going into that, up from the original 500,000 proposed. So that's a great outcome for the community by partnershiping with others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No other councillor wishes to speak. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Potter, Councillor White, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Arnott. Carried 7-0. We'll now move on to item 8.7, which is the Development Plan Colac West. The purpose of this report is to consider the approval of the Colac West Development Plan. Councillors, before I ask for a motion, do any councillors wish to ask a question of officers? Councillor Finnegan.
I wish to declare a conflict of interest as
Thank
I had
you.
earlier. So just to repeat, I have a conflict of interest in relation to this item, a general conflict of interest. This is due to the fact that my uncle owns land within the area of the development plan. So
Thanks,
I'll be
Councillor
stepping
Finnegan.
out.
We'll let you know when we've completed the item. Oh, yeah, okay. Councillors, before I ask for further questions, I'll wait for Councillor Finnegan to leave. Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. CEO just reminded me that it would be good to point out that there is a revised recommendation by the officers, which is, I believe, on the board right now. Thank you. Questions? Kate.
What has changed
Kate.
on this revised recommendation?
Kate's asking the question, what's changed? Lothain?
Through you, Mayor, we have reviewed the documentation in detail, including a proposed shared infrastructure funding plan that formed part of the document. Having reviewed the matter in greater detail, it's been determined that in actual fact infrastructure provision would be better sought through the planning permit application process with Section 173 agreements relating to infrastructure provision. So basically, the recommendation says that the development plan, it recommends that it be approved, but that those references to having a shared infrastructure funding plan be removed from the written document, and instead it be clarified within the document that the delivery of infrastructure would be the developer's responsibility still, but would be achieved through Section 173 agreements relating to planning applications for subdivision based on the development plan, which would also look at matters such as the staging and timing of the provision of the various pieces of infrastructure. That's really the only change that's proposed. It's recommended that based on that change, responsibility for approving the development plan be delegated to officers. So basically that change be made and then we approve it. Otherwise it would be exactly as is in front of councillors currently today. And then that submitters are, and the applicant are acknowledged in terms of the submissions that they've made, and also that the submitters are notified when the development plan is approved. So really it just relates to the method of infrastructure delivery, nothing else.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Hart, then Councillor Potter, and then Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to tease out what this means for the people who have properties on Rifle Butts Road. And in teasing that out, whatever it might be that you come up to subject to this resolution, are they being required to pay for internal roads? It would seem to unclear to me when they're talking about roads at the Rifle Butts, people facing Rifle Butts Road, that they're having to pay for roads. Are we just talking about sealing that road, or is it the other internal roads that feed into the development? And at what stage would they have to pay, if at all, if they decided they just wanted to live on their block of land as it exists now? Are they then going to have to contribute?
Through you, Mayor, just to clarify, the DM Property Group owns the bulk of the land within the area that's affected by this development plan, and they'd be responsible for the bulk of the infrastructure upgrades to serve this development. The section of road, the southern half of Rifle Butts Road, where the smaller landowners and the submitters to this plan have land, the principle there would be that if they were to subdivide their land, then they'd be required through their planning permit to contribute towards the upgrade of the road fronting onto that land. The northern section of Rifle Butts Road would be sealed and drained as part of the development approved for DM Property Group. But those smaller landowners have no obligation to make any payments for infrastructure upgrade until they decide to subdivide their land. If they choose to remain on those sites without further subdivision occurring, then there's no obligation on them at all.
Councillor Hart, follow-up question?
Yeah, well, with that, and I should have mentioned the construction of the wetlands too, which I thought that they seem to be under the impression they would have to contribute to. If they don't subdivide and they don't have to contribute, which you've made that quite clear, so who funds that proportion in the meantime? Is it that council funds a proportion and the developer of the rest of the development funds a proportion?
Through you, Mayor, my understanding is that the DM Property Group, who again owns the bulk of the land within the development plan area, would be paying the full cost of the stormwater, the new wetland proposed on the western side of Rifle Butts Road.
Just one last follow-up.
I think we're getting there, Mayor, but so does that mean that if subsequently one of the people that we've been talking about fronting that Rifle Butts Road subdivides and has to now make a contribution, that goes back to the main property developer? Is that how that works?
Through you, Mayor, my understanding is that there wouldn't be any contribution towards that wetland from those smaller property owners, that because the bulk of the land is in the ownership of DM Property Group, that they would pay for the full cost of that wetland. I mean, they're obviously in a position to subdivide first and need that infrastructure to be put in place. So my understanding is that's the agreement that...
I appreciate your indulgence, but if we go through this and come back, we'll probably all forgot what we were talking about. But I felt from the representative of the property group that they were under the impression that they're fully paying for the land, but not the construction of the wetland. Well, have I misunderstood, and they are also paying for the construction of the wetland?
My understanding is that they would be paying for the construction of the wetland as well as having acquired the land for that wetland.
Thank you, Mr McNeil. There are other hands up. Councillor Potter?
Thanks, Mayor. My questions are similar to Councillor Hart, who's probably ticked them off, but it seems to me that the changes made to the recommendation are as a direct result of the submissions, raising the issues around the original recommendation, locking them into infrastructure development costs, and that has been addressed now. Am I reading that right?
Through you, Mayor, the funding mechanism for infrastructure was already under review. Certainly it would appear that that review will address the concerns, but it was something that was already being considered by Council and considered that there was a more appropriate way than the shared infrastructure funding plan to actually achieve the outcome sought. But as I say, it should also address the concerns of submitters.
Thanks, Pauline. Quick follow-up, Councillor Potter.
Thanks. Thanks for that answer. So, am I right in thinking if this revised recommendation is adopted, those small landholders, we're not locking them into any financial contributions in relation to infrastructure at this stage? That will be dealt with down the track.
Through you, Mayor, as Mr McNeil said, in effect, triggers for infrastructure provision would relate to land being developed at any given time. If their land wasn't being developed, then they wouldn't at this point be making any contributions.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Arnott, did you have a question? Councillor Costin. Thank you.
Thank you. With the change to Section 173 agreements, I'm still interested in how the costs of construction of Rifle Butts Road would be apportioned amongst the various small property owners, and not just Rifle Butts Road, but also the upgrade of the intersection with the Princes Highway. Will that be at the cost of those small property owners, or will the larger property owner also contribute in some way?
Mr McNeil?
Through you, Mayor. I guess the approach that's been taken to, rather than have a shared infrastructure funding plan where council in effect acts as a banker and takes contributions from landowners to then construct infrastructure upgrades, to instead the approach that's being recommended to council tonight, which is to negotiate with developers to have conditions put on planning permits that requires various works to be undertaken by the developers at the time of development, minimises the financial risk to council associated with developing this precinct. In terms of Rifle Butts Road, the northern section, as I said earlier, would be the upgrade of that road, section of road would be paid for by DM Property Group, who would be subdividing land adjacent to it. The southern part of Rifle Butts Road, there would need to be negotiation with future landowners at the time that those sites were subdivided, with the principle that that land fronts onto the road and that they should bear a portion of the cost of upgrading it. There's some potential down the track when that land's subdivided that council may need to bear the burden of contributing a small amount towards that upgrade, but that's for a later time to be negotiated with those landowners at that point. Certainly the majority of development to occur in this precinct in the shorter term is likely to be that under the ownership of DM Property Group.
Thank you, Mr McNeil. Councillor Costin.
In relation to the upgrade of the intersection with the Princes Highway?
Through you, Mayor, that would be the same as for the upgrade of that intersection, and the costs apportioned by the subdividers within that precinct would be negotiated at the time of any future permit application, as I've explained for the southern section of Rifle Butts Road.
Thank you.
So, DM Property Group contributing funds towards the upgrade of the intersection?
Through you, Mayor, I don't believe that they would be contributing towards that intersection upgrade.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Sorry, I thought we had this sorted out. So who will be? If the property group's not contributing to it, someone has to pay for it.
Through you, Mayor, DM Property Group would be paying for the cost of the new north-south connector road and for the intersection upgrade onto Murray Street that's associated with that road. But my understanding is that they're not contributing to the potential upgrade of the intersection with Rifle Butts Road and Murray Street. The bulk of the traffic associated with their development is in fact either going to be using the north-south collector road or the extension of Moore Street that then connects into existing residential development to the east. Therefore, it's expected that the landowners in the southern half of Rifle Butts Road would be responsible for paying a portion of the upgrade works, and the nature of what that portion is would have to be negotiated at the time, and there's some potential that council might need to contribute partly to the costs of that intersection upgrade and the sealing of the southern section of Rifle Butts Road. But to go back to the earlier answer I gave, the officers believe that this places council with the least financial risk associated with any of the options of allowing development of this land and approving the development plan.
Councillor Hart.
Sorry, Mayor, I might be a bit thick. I thought I had the answer on this, and then suddenly at the last minute we ran off on a different tangent. So the upgrade of Rifle Butts Road at the where it intersects with Murray Street, I think you just said will be borne by the property owners on Rifle Butts Road, but I thought earlier we said that if they don't subdivide, they don't have to pay for that upgrade. So does the upgrade only happen if they subdivide? And if not, well, who's paying for that?
Through you, Mayor, the upgrade to the intersection at Murray Street and Rifle Butts Road wouldn't occur if subdivision in that southern part of Rifle Butts Road is not occurring. So there's no obligation on those landowners until that point.
Key. Thank you. Councillor Potter, did you have...
No, I'm fine, thanks, Mayor.
Fine, thanks. No other questions?
Mayor?
Councillor
Yes, Mayor.
Costin.
So The upgrade of the intersection at Murray Street or Princess Highway will be triggered if there's by Regional Roads or Department of Transport and Planning on the basis of a referral of a subdivision. So if one small lot holder there proposes to subdivide, it may trigger or it may not. If next one does it, it may or may not trigger. Third one does, it might trigger an upgrade of that intersection. I'm not sure how the upgrade would be funded fairly amongst all those who benefit from it.
Through you, Mayor, Council wouldn't need to rely just on the Department of Transport and Planning to, through referral, make a recommendation for a condition of that nature. Council would itself be able to negotiate with landowners as sites are put forward for subdivision. It's something that would need, the detail of how that all occurs would need to be negotiated at the time. What we're saying to Council through this report is that this approach minimises the financial risk to Council rather than having to pay significant amounts of money up front through receiving contributions from developers to implement the infrastructure upgrades that are required. So rather than having to do that, it's accepting that there is a lesser financial risk, that those two infrastructure items I referred to about the upgrade to the intersection with Princess Highway, Murray Street, and the sealing of that southern section of Rifle Butts Road, that the Council may, at some point in the future, may need to contribute towards the upgrade of those in conjunction with accepting contributions from the private landowners as those sites are subdivided. I can't give any more detail to your question than I have tonight.
Thanks.
Yeah, but with all due respect, Council transferring its risk onto the private landholders is not something that I'm comfortable with, really. And I'm not sure that we've actually sorted out how that intersection will be funded. Will it be funded by all the small landholders there or just one of them as things move along? How will it happen?
Through you, Mayor, there's a number of different ways that subdivision in that precinct might occur. There's a significant land holding on the corner of the Princess Highway that might be subdivided first, and that might prompt there to be a significant contribution towards those upgrades. So there's any number of possibilities to how that happens. It's just a matter that would need to be negotiated at the time. I can't give any more detail around what that outcome is, except to say that we acknowledge that there is some risk that Council may need to contribute to those pieces of infrastructure in the longer term. It's not considered that they're likely to be short-term developments.
Thank you, Mr McNeill. I think we need to move on now. Councillor Costin.
One more.
Last question.
It would seem that there's not much in the way of negotiation there because Council holds all the cards. And if you want to permit the subdivide, you have to pay what Council wants to be paid.
Through you, Mayor, I guess I would just like to add that it's not unusual that when applications are received for subdivision, that Council needs to review the circumstances of that proposal and what demand it generates for off-site infrastructure to service that development. And Council on any given day, when we receive applications, have to make those judgments and assess them when they come before us. So it's a commonly held principle that for subdivision, which generates traffic and drainage needs and so on, that we need to look at what off-site infrastructure has to occur to support that, and that would be the approach we'd take for future subdivision of any of those sites.
Thanks, Mr McNeill. I think we need to move on to the motion. The councillors' officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to that? Councillor Arnott, can you say which motion you're moving, please, Councillor?
This is an officer's recommendation on the board up there. I'm happy for Councillor Hart to move it and I'll second it if that's the preference.
You'll set. Okay, thanks, Councillor Arnott. You're moving that motion, which is the officer's recommendation, which is up on the screen right now.
Yes, it is.
Councillor, I call for a seconder. Councillor Hart, I believe you got your hand up rather quickly for that too. Thank you. Councillor Arnott as mover.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, it's actually quite exciting to see this finally come forward, to get this land rezoned and the development start to move ahead. As the developers has said themselves, there's been quite a rewarding experience to work with our executive and our staff to further this development. They've been able to find a proactive way through to get an agreement to move forward. And it's appropriate for a developer like DM Property Group to pay for most of the infrastructure. That's the way these things work. We do not want the cost of these things to fall on existing ratepayers. Existing ratepayers have already paid for the roads when they bought a block of land where they are now. So this is just continuation of that process. The blocks of lands that you see for sale in other developments down near where the old tip was and that's all about the price of those has embedded in them the cost of the roads and access and other infrastructure. That's what's going to happen here. And the way this has been worded makes sure that the costs are not unduly borne by people who've decided not to develop their land now, so that they can afford to continue to stay there. There are a few small landholders who are on the the southern end of Rifle Butts Road, and they can continue to stay there unimpeded. The road will stay as it is, but if they want to develop that land along with those other larger lots that are against the highway, and there's also, as noted before, land to the west of Rifle Butts Road, which is farmland, that may be further developed in the future. When they do that, they will be responsible for the development of Rifle Butts Road and the intersection with the main highway. For the moment, the DM Property Group are developing the rest of it and the new road that's going to get access through down beside the specialist school and the feeder roads that go into it. So, look, I really welcome the development by this. It's great to see the confidence of developers coming into town and putting these many hundreds of lots onto the market to expand our town. And I think it's important for people to understand this is just the first instalment on a really, really great plan for the whole Deans Creek precinct, going right throughout to Eliminate. This will see Colac have thousands of new lots go forward in there and will actually potentially double the size of the town. I think that's actually great.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Hart as seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to thank the people who have put in written submissions and also the verbal submissions we were given today. This is an exciting development for Colac. Will offer many people the opportunity to live in Colac, and there's obviously a shortage of housing, and that's been a priority of this council to improve the availability of residential land in Colac and other towns for that matter. I'm satisfied to support the resolution now. We've got those answers. I appreciate the officer's answers on the infrastructure. I think the immediate concerns of the owners on Rifle Butts Road has largely been addressed in that they won't be, as I hear it, they won't be required to make a contribution unless they too subdivide, and even that the details will have to reflect the significance of their share of the subdivision. The largest part will be from the largest property owner, and that's entirely appropriate. I think this builds on and reflects some of the work done with the Colac 2050 plan. And I remember when we were dealing with that Colac 2050 plan, in conjunction with that fed on work done by G21, I remember when we questioned and people said, why would you ever need all these extra blocks of land in Colac? Well, I think it's obvious to everyone that there is a need for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of more residential blocks in Colac, and this will make a significant contribution to that, as well as some of the other developments that Councillor Arnott touched on, such as the Bruce Street one.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor.
And then Councillor Costa.
Very pleased to see this before us. We've been looking at this and talking about this ever since I've been on council, I think, and this is a big step forward if this is approved. There's a development plan overlay put over this land in 2009, which just shows how long ago this parcel of land was identified as the potential for residential development. And by opening this up, we can achieve 450 to 600 housing lots, which is a great achievement, I think. And I hope everyone will support this and get things moving along further. We heard from some submitters outlining some concerns that they were going to be locked into paying money for some infrastructure that doesn't benefit them or that someone else will get the benefit from and doesn't really affect their properties. The officers have responded to that and have laid my concerns over that, and that will be dealt with down the track as development occurs. So, Mayor, this is really, really good to see from my point of view.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. I think you had your hand up, Councillor Costin. You wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'll support this recommendation. It is an exciting development. It's a great step forward. But it's not going to be the solution to all our housing problems. There are already 150 houses on the market in Colac and 120 vacant lots. So adding more lots and more spec houses or whatever is not going to solve the housing problem. But this is a great site for a development, and I think it's been laid out quite well, and we've incorporated sports grounds into it, which is great. I am concerned, though, about the cost of the southern part of Rocker Butts Road and the intersection with the Princes Highway. I think by not providing the landholders, those small lot holders, with some certainty at this point, we're in fact going to cause those landholders to delay any subdivision of their lots until they see who else is going to subdivide it and who has to pay for these costs of upgrading the intersection. And it may all fall on one or two of those lots. And as soon as that happens, then the next will all reap the benefit of the upgrades of the intersection. So I would have liked to have seen that sorted out a little better. And I hope the officers recognise this as we move forward and try to work with those landholders so that they don't hold back on subdividing those small lots that they own. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. Do any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Hanson?
Yeah, I'll be supporting this motion. I also think it's a very positive development. And as Councillor Potter said, this has been a very long time in the making. It is a slow process getting to this stage. It's a very long process. And I think some of the discussion tonight also highlights that it's a complicated process because there's a lot of costs involved, a lot of things to think about, a lot of new infrastructure that's needed. But I think the outcome that we've got is quite a good one. What's positive about this development is that the land abuts the existing township. It can link into existing infrastructure and facilities. It's close to schools. It's that land that to the north part of the land borders the lake, which is a really idealistic spot. There's also then that opportunity to link the walking trail along the lake, to link with this development, the link with the new, recently fabulously developed specialist school, and hopefully in time too, open space and sporting grounds. I think it's an ideal site, and I very much welcome this stage. And it's a real pleasure actually that it's coming to council. While I am still on council, because it's certainly been talked about for the 8 years while I have been here, and so it's a real pleasure to see it on the agenda tonight and to be able to support it.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Hanson, Councillor White, Councillor Potter, Councillor Hart. Carried 6-0. Thank you, councillors. Could we invite Councillor Finnegan back into the room, please? And we'll move to item 8.8, Planning Scheme Review. Welcome back, Councillor Finnegan. We're moving on to item 8.8, Planning Scheme Review. The purpose of this report is to receive and note the 2024 Planning Scheme Review. Councillors, before I ask for a motion, do any councillors have questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. The reading in the consultant's report on page 12 of the proposal, it recommends we undertake community consultation on the findings and draft recommendations before the review is adopted by council. Yet the officer report says this is a standalone report, highly technical, and won't benefit from further community engagement. So why can the officers involved just explain a little bit more why this shouldn't go out for community consultation?
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Mr McNeil, thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Noting that the report does talk about potential community consultation on the report, it's certainly not a standard practice that happens. A lot of planning scheme reviews are done just as a desktop analysis of how the scheme is performing, its efficiency, and making recommendations to councils about future strategic planning work that they might do to improve the efficiency of planning processes. So in this particular instance, the officers have made a recommendation to council to note the report today and haven't recommended that there be further community consultation on the report. It does provide this council and the next council to follow after the elections with material to help guide them in how they allocate resources in planning. But it is certainly an option for council tonight, if it was a commonly held view that there should be engagement, that it's an option for you to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McNeil. Any other questions? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Can I ask or just confirm, just to be clear, and it's clear in my mind, but that what we're doing tonight does not make any decision, does not bind the next council, does not influence anything other than putting out this review for, if it goes for community consultation for that, but presents it to the next council who will gather their own information, ask their questions, do the review of this review, so to speak, and they will make the final decisions in relation to this. Is that the case?
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Mr McNeil.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor. I certainly support that proposition. This report only seeks for council to note the work that's been done. The report provides a range of comments and recommendations for councils to consider. And it will certainly provide a really good platform for the new council to consider how they want to proceed in future years around what they fund and do in relation to strategic planning. And there's no decision made tonight about any of those things. It's for council to note.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr McNeil. Councillor Hart.
When you're ready, Mayor, I've got an alternative resolution to move, please.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Before we get to that, any other questions? Councillor Hart, would you like to read out your alternate resolution, and we'll move to getting a seconder once we know what you're moving?
Right, read it all out. Okay. My alternative resolution reads that Council 1 receives and notes the findings of the 2024 Planning Scheme Review and refers further consideration of the Planning Scheme Review report, to a future council meeting post the 2024 council election. 2, highlights the recommendation in the report to review delegations for planning applications and commentary in the report suggesting that the number of objections required for planning matters to be considered by the Planning Committee, which currently consists of all councillors, should increase from at least 4 to at least 6. 3, highlights the reference in the report that recommends that refusals to build a dwelling in a farm zone should be decided by officers under delegation rather than the Planning Committee. 4, notes that this resolution is not an endorsement of any changes to the instrument of delegation, even where the potential changes are suggested in the report, particularly those outlined in point 2 and 3 above. 5, determines that the Chief Executive Officer will outline any proposed changes to councillors and the community when the matter is being further considered. 6, notes the planning scheme review is a report of future actions and recommendations for council to consider, and that any changes to delegations or the planning scheme are the subject of future reports and decisions of a council following a period of at least 6 weeks community consultation to a future council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Given Councillor, do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. The planning scheme is obviously a very important part of what people can and can't do on their properties. This planning scheme report contains a lot of good information on what is needed to update Colac Otway's planning scheme. Such a report's produced every few years and guides the strategic planning updates. Planning schemes ultimately require ministerial approval, and the changes can take a considerable time, years in some cases, for community consultation, departmental approvals and final sign-off by the Minister. Improving planning to allow houses to be built in rural areas and rural towns, and undertaking a gaming strategy and licensed premises strategy are some of the worthwhile changes identified on page 335 of this agenda. In fact, if you look at the agenda, you'll see that some of these initiatives, such as review of Birregurra structure plans, already started. There's others, such as reviewing the Apollo Bay structure plan, which has been budgeted for in the 24-25 budget, and some others, and I'd expect that those would happen anyway because they have been budgeted and funded. However, I have particular concern with the plan to increase the number of objections required from 4 to 6. It's been a minimum of 4 for, I think, approximately 20 years. So before a member of the community can bring their concerns to the attention of councillors, there has to be enough objections, otherwise the matter is decided on delegation. And I think that, personally, I think the number should stay at 4, but this report recommends it be increased to 6. I have particular concerns with the planned refusals to build a home in the farm zone being decided by council staff on delegation, rather than decision being made by councillors out in the open where the public can see each councillor's response. I also have concerns with the suggestion that council should lobby the government to make it even harder to build a home in the farm zone. We don't need more restrictions on building a home in rural areas. So the motion that I've moved notes the report. It allows it to proceed to consider, but it adds some important changes. It draws out some of those issues that I've been touching on, and importantly, it talks about a need for some public consultation before these various issues are decided on further, and they have to be decided in an open and transparent way, and one of the provisions there tries to make that clear in it.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm pleased to support this motion of Councillor Hart, and particularly pleased with the inclusion of the community consultation period of 6 weeks. I think without putting my point of view and opinion anywhere, Councillor Hart has highlighted some concerns that he has and others may have to help kickstart the new council in their consideration of the scheme, and what points in particular perhaps they might need to be talking about and looking at, and likewise for the community as well. But this is important work. The scheme gets reviewed every few years, as Councillor Hart said. We've started some of that work, and that is continuing. But in the meantime, this does kickstart the new council with a way forward with a review of the scheme.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin, then Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor. This is one of the most important decisions that council can make. The planning scheme is very important. It affects the availability of housing affects our population growth, our economy, and the amenity of those who live in our municipality. I'm a little surprised there was no recommendation in the officer's recommendation for community consultation, particularly given the opening statement, the purpose in our planning scheme is that schemes should express state, regional, local and community expectations for areas and land uses. But how can we do that without consultation? That's reinforced by the Local Government Act that has at its core really the aim of ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to engage with council on local priorities and the future of their community. And we adopted a community engagement plan to do just that, to comply with the Act. In relation to the number of objections, I think it's important we recognise that we have a number of small towns, Kennet River, for example, population of 250 or so. 4 objections is a big percentage of objections from the landholders in that area. So we've got to recognise that we have small communities, and 4 objections is still quite a considerable number of objections. And in the farm zone, thanks to for Councillor Hart for putting in the additional words there, we should be looking at using our farmland for its highest economic use. And it seems that the farm strategies being applied from Spring Street don't really consider some of the changes that have occurred for small-scale farming. I recall one of the applications that came to council was for a small block in Barramunga for someone to plant native food plants on 1.5 acres, and they needed a shed in the house to live there and monitor it, and I think that's a use that's really not being considered by the way by a black and white interpretation of the state government planning laws at the moment. So I think we need to retain the option to apply a sympathetic and locally informed interpretation of the planning guidelines rather than just rely on the black and white of that. And council can apply that local knowledge and that sympathetic view and a locally informed view. We want to avoid situations where we have small lots of stranded farm blocks in a farm zone, which will never become farms. It'll just sit there and have be its lowest economic use because it'll sit there as a hobby farm or something else, but a hobby farm without a house. It's
3 minutes, Councillor Costin, plus.
Just going to waste it. So it's great that we give our community the opportunity to comment on this review. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Any other councillor? Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm supporting Councillor Hart's motion here. I think that while it's important to update planning schemes on a regular basis, and I understand this review is merely just in front of us for essentially this council to note before further decisions made by the future council post-election. It is, I really hope that the next council does look at this motion or this resolution, I should say, and is reminded of how well existing triggers the officers are recommended to change in this report are serving our community. I think councillors should retain the ability to decide on houses in the farm zone in the chamber if officers recommend against approving those. We've got many small lots in our shire which is zoned for farming that could never reasonably support a viable farm. I'd hope the future council doesn't make it harder for people to build homes in the farm zone, especially when we are in a housing crisis. The amount of objections required for a planning item come before the planning committee is currently 4, and this report is seeking to change that up to 6 objections. Like the farming zone change, and as pointed out by Councillor Hart, this wasn't highlighted by officers. This was in the report, and I applaud Councillor Hart for going looking and being able to find this and bringing this to everyone's attention and moving this alternative motion so it's highlighted for the community to consider. So I'll be supporting Councillor Hart's motion, and here's the next council.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. And of course, I'll support the motion in principle because it's only just going to take it further forward. And I guess the differences in some views is really important that we go out to the community and have that consultation. So I thank Councillor for including that sort of process in this. The need for 4 objectors to bring it to council, I think that's my experience, and I will admit it's been limited compared to Councillor Hart over time, but when there's been more than 4 or more, there's usually been 6 or more. So it's been come to us anyway. And we always have an opportunity as a councillor to pull an application in. We don't need that trigger as the only means to get it into council. But when you have that trigger there all of the time, what it does do is potentially make applications bureaucratic, so that then an application can't just be dealt with by officers who might actually deal with it quite sympathetically towards what the applicant wants, but then has to come to council, has to wait for 30 or 60 days for the appropriate meeting, for the appropriate process, and then we become accused of being that council has become difficult to deal with. You can't get quick decisions and developers shy away from us. And I have heard that, and that would be not something I want to hear again. So I think this is to trying to deal with that. So I'd ask the future council to consider those things when they consider the final draft recommendations.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Any other councillor? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Potter, Councillor White, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Arnott. It's carried 7-0. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to item 8.9. And that's the adoption of the investment policy. The purpose of this report is to provide councillors with a revised investment policy for adoption. Councillors, before I ask for a motion, do any councillors have a question? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. This is an important policy, and I'm aware we've had a similar policy for some years. But my question is, I think back to that terrible situation with Pyramid Building Society and how before it closed down, I mean, after the event, everyone said, oh yes, you could see that was going to happen, but there were always people who have benefit of hindsight. What's in this policy to ensure that when council's investing council funds on deposit, that we can seek to minimise that risk of such a terrible situation that occurred then when suddenly overnight people no longer had access to their funds?
Thanks for the question. Mr Tenney? CEO?
In fairness to our General Manager of Corporate Services, he's actually been away for a number of weeks. Welcome back, Mr Tenney, but I'll be able to assist with Councillor Hart's question. I'd just draw to councillors and the community's attention that the revised council policy retains a really helpful table. Table number 1 that sets out the minimum credit rating required for any entity that council may invest with, and that sets a very high bar to make sure that it's a very credible and safe institution in which council can put its public funds. So that is the way the policy guides that and is quite conservative.
Thank you, CEO. Any other questions? No other questions. Councillors, the officers have a question, Councillor Arnott, or you wish to move the motion? You wish to move the motion. Thank you, Councillor Arnott. What motion are you moving?
The officer's recommendation,
Officer's
please.
recommendation. I've got a seconder. Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. Look, this is a well-considered investment policy. As the Mayor, well, the CEO pointed out, There is information here which puts very stringent measure around the financial capacity of the institution we're going to invest in, and also point out that Councillor Hart's question was very, very valid, but that was an incident with a building society. These are banks, and all banks in Australia are backed by the Reserve Bank, and then ultimately by the federal government. So that gives that reassurances in the background. And so I think that our ratepayers can have a level of measure of certainty around this recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Councillor Finnegan?
Nothing else to say other than I endorse Councillor Arnott's comments on the matter.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm quite happy with that answer from that reassurance from the CEO. This has been an important policy. We didn't always have such a policy like this. And we have had, perhaps for the last 10 years or so, I'm not sure exactly, and before then it was when councillors realised that council had significant funds that were available on short term, and we're not getting the best possible return. So I think this policy achieves that balance, and Councillor Arnott did make a good point that this policy does focus on banks, and ultimately the Reserve Bank, if it has to, and the government will have what I've heard referred to as a shotgun wedding between banks if one starts to get into trouble. I think the last one I can recall, just from history, was perhaps in 1979 when ANZ had to take over a particular bank. So, yeah, I'm more than happy to support this particular policy.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Any other councillor? No other councillor? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Hanson, Councillor White, Councillor Potter, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Hart. Thank you, councillors. We agreed at the beginning of the meeting that we would break around this time and go into our closed session. So I need to close this meeting. And I need a motion. Councillors, does anyone wish to move a motion to move into the closed session? Councillor Finnegan, seconded Councillor Arnott. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Potter, Councillor White, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Arnott. We'll now move into a closed session. We'll take a quick break while we set that up. Thank you, councillors.